3 counselors, 3 different camps, 3 years apart. None of them knew each other. None of them had ever heard each other's stories. And yet, when I read all 3 accounts back to back, they described the exact same detail. Something too tall to be a person, standing perfectly still, watching a cabin full of sleeping kids. I'm not going to tell you what that detail is yet. You're going to hear it for yourself, 3 times, from 3 strangers who still don't know what they saw. If you're the type who checks the locks before bed, maybe skip this one. If you're still here, welcome back to camp. Story 1. The counselor who counted his campers twice. I worked 5 summers at a wilderness camp in the Adirondacks before any of this happened, so by the time I tell you this story, understand, I was not a nervous person. I'd handled bear sightings, a kid who broke his arm off a rope swing, a lightning storm that knocked a tree onto the mess hall. Nothing rattled me anymore. That changed during my last summer there, in a cabin we called Loon Point. Loon Point held 8 campers, all boys, ages 12 and 13, split into 2 rooms of 4. I slept in a small counselor's room at the front, separated from the boys by a thin plywood wall you could hear a whisper through. The first strange thing happened on a Tuesday. One of my quieter kids, a boy named Dorian, asked if we could leave the hallway light on. When I asked why, he said someone kept opening his door at night and just standing there. I told him it was probably one of the other boys messing with him, and I made everyone promise loudly in front of each other that the prank, if it was a prank, needed to stop. It didn't stop. It got worse. 2 nights later, at 2:40 in the morning, I woke up to every single boy in that cabin screaming at once. Not startled awake screaming, the kind of screaming that comes from something you can't unsee. I ran in and found all 8 of them crammed into one corner of the room, as far from the door as the walls would let them get. When I asked what happened, nobody could get a full sentence out. Finally, Dorian pointed at the open closet. He said something had been standing in the closet doorway when he woke up. Not in the doorway of the room, inside the closet, filling the frame of it completely, shoulder to shoulder, with its head bent forward because the closet wasn't tall enough for it to stand up straight. He said it didn't move. It didn't breathe that he could hear. It was just facing them, and somehow, even without seeing eyes, every boy in that room understood exactly which one of them it was looking at. I checked the closet myself. Empty. I checked the window latches, locked from the inside, the way they'd been all week. I checked under both beds, behind the door, in the bathroom. Nothing. I told the boys it was a nightmare shared by exhausted, spooked kids feeding off each other, which, for what it's worth, I actually believed at the time. I moved a cot into their room and told them I'd stay the rest of the night. At some point, I dozed off sitting up. What woke me wasn't a sound. It was the temperature. The room had gone cold enough that I could see my own breath, and every one of the boys, without me waking them, had pulled their blankets up over their heads at the exact same time, like they'd rehearsed it. I did a head count out of habit. 8. I did it again because my hands were shaking too badly to trust the first count. 8. Then I looked at the closet, and the door, which I had personally shut and checked less than 3 hours earlier, was open again. Not wide open, just cracked, maybe 4 inches. The exact width needed for something to see out without being seen. I didn't check it that time. I sat with my back against it until sunrise. The next morning, the camp director walked the property with me and found something none of us could explain. On the outside wall of Loon Point, directly behind that closet, there were 4 horizontal scrape marks in the wood siding, spaced almost exactly like fingers, starting about 7 feet off the ground and dragging downward. 7 feet. The closet itself, floor to ceiling, was 6'2". We moved the boys to a different cabin that day. Maintenance replaced the closet door within the week. No explanation given to parents, just a work order that said, damaged, replace. I asked the maintenance guy what had damaged it. He said the wood around the hinges looked like it had been bent from the inside, like something had tried to widen the frame rather than open the door. I never went back to that camp after that summer, and to this day I still don't understand how something too big to fit in a 6-foot closet was somehow standing inside one, watching 8 kids sleep. Story 2. The Boathouse Dare. I was 15 the summer my parents shipped me off to a lake camp in Wisconsin, mostly, I think, to get me away from a boyfriend they didn't approve of. I hated almost everything about that camp except one person, a girl in my cabin named Odalis who could make even mandatory canoe drills feel like the best part of my day. I did a lot of stupid things that summer to get her attention. This is the story of the stupidest one. On our 4th night, a counselor named Reeve told us about the old boathouse at the far end of the property, the one with the padlocked doors and the boarded windows that nobody used anymore. According to him, back in the 80s, a counselor had gone in there alone one night to check on storm damage and was never seen leaving. The boathouse was searched. No body was ever found inside it. Reeves swore he wasn't supposed to tell us this story, said it wasn't camp approved, and made us all promise not to repeat it. Naturally, that promise lasted about 4 hours. A group of us snuck out after lights out to sit on the dock, and somebody suggested truth or dare, and somebody else, not me, I want that on record, dared me to break into the boathouse and stay inside for 10 minutes. Odalis was standing right there. I said yes before I even finished hearing the dare. The padlock, it turned out, was decorative. The hasp was rusted clean through, and the door swung open with one shove. Inside smelled like wet rope and mildew, and it was darker than anything I'd experienced before. The kind of dark where your eyes never adjust because there's simply no light to adjust to. I used my phone flashlight to look around. Old canoes stacked on racks, a workbench, a single life vest hanging from a nail, faded orange, decades out of style. For the first 3 or 4 minutes, nothing happened, and I actually started to feel a little disappointed, like I'd built up this huge moment for nothing. Then I heard something drip. Once, then again, closer. I swept my flashlight across the ceiling, expecting a leak, and found nothing wet at all. The dripping kept going, moving, not falling from one spot, but tracking across the room like it was following a path just above my head. I told myself it was an animal. Raccoons get into places like this constantly. I kept my light aimed up, walking backward toward the door, and that's when my flashlight beam landed on the workbench and I saw 4 wet handprints on its surface that had not been there 30 seconds earlier. Small handprints, not adult-sized.
I turned to leave, and the door was shut. I know I left it open. I remember the night air on my back the entire time I was walking around. I pulled on it, and it didn't budge. Not stuck, not swollen with damp wood, just solid, like it had been that way for years. I started pounding on it, and I heard Odalis on the other side, her voice tight with panic, telling me the door wouldn't open from outside either, that 2 of the guys were pulling on it and it wasn't moving. And then, behind me, close enough that I felt it disturb the air near my ear, I heard breathing that was not my own. Shallow. Wet. I did not turn around. I have never, in my life, wanted so badly not to turn around. The door gave way. Reeves' voice this time, not Odalis's, shouting that he'd finally gotten it. And I don't remember running. I just remember being outside, on the ground, with 6 flashlights pointed at my face, and Odalis's hands shaking as she checked I wasn't hurt.
I got sent home 2 days early for breaking curfew. I never told my parents why I actually didn't fight the punishment. Years later, out of curiosity, I looked into whether a counselor really had disappeared at that camp in the 80s. The camp had changed names twice since then, and most records were gone. But I did find one archived local newspaper clipping, badly scanned, barely legible, about a missing 19-year-old lake counselor from decades ago whose case was never closed. I still have the screenshot saved. I've never gone looking for anything else about it, and I don't plan to. Story 3. The man who knocked politely. My family has run a small overnight camp in the Pacific Northwest for almost 30 years, and I took over running it day-to-day about 6 years ago. I'm telling you this story exactly as it happened, and I still work at this camp, which is exactly why I'm not using its real name. It started on the last morning of our second session. The way these stories always seem to start, quietly, with something you almost brush off. A 10-year-old girl named Pippa came to breakfast looking hollowed out with exhaustion and told me very matter-of-factly that she was glad she was going home because the knocking man kept waking her up. I asked what she meant, expecting some half-remembered nightmare. She said 2 nights in a row something had knocked on her cabin window. Not banged, knocked, politely like someone at a front door. And when she looked, there was a man standing outside wearing something over his face that she described only as the deer thing. She said he'd asked, very calmly, if she could come outside because he'd lost something in the woods and needed a small hand to help him find it. She said no. He knocked twice more, said, "That's all right," and walked into the trees. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even particularly scared telling me this. Kids process things strangely sometimes, and I chalked it up to an anxious dream mixed with the isolation talking. I made a note, checked on her, and sent her home with the rest of session 2 that afternoon. That night I stayed behind alone to prep for session 3, which is normal. I do it every changeover. Around 11 p.m., our motion sensor floodlight on the east cabin kicked on. Our floodlights are not sensitive. It takes something roughly human-sized to trigger them. I watched through the window for almost a full minute. Nothing. The light eventually clicked back off on its timer. 20 minutes later, I heard knocking. Not urgent. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, from the front door of the main office where I was working. I called out asking who was there. No answer. 3 3 more knocks, same rhythm, patient, almost courteous. I looked through the side window and the porch was empty. I want to be honest with you. I told myself it was a raccoon getting into the porch railing. Even though raccoons don't knock in sets of 3 with even spacing, I sat back down. 10 minutes later, the knocking moved. Now it was coming from the back sliding door, off the kitchenette, the one with the thin curtain I'd never bothered replacing. The knock was softer this time, almost gentle. I walked over, and through the gap in the curtain, I could see the outline of a person standing directly on the other side of the glass. I pulled the curtain back half an inch, and looking in at me was a man wearing a mask made to look like the front half of a deer's skull, bleached pale, with the antlers sawn down short. He was not moving aggressively. He was simply standing there, hands folded in front of him like he was waiting to be led into a business meeting. He said through the glass, in a voice that was unsettlingly calm, that he wouldn't take long, and that he just needed to show me what was in his bag. I asked him to leave. He said, "Not yet," and knocked once more, softly on the glass, the same 3-knock rhythm as before. I called 911 with my hands barely working. While I was on the phone, he simply turned and walked back into the tree line at a normal, unhurried pace, like a man leaving after being told the store was closed. Police searched through the night and into the next morning. They never found him. What they did find, hanging neatly on a low branch about 200 yards into the woods, was the deer mask, placed almost ceremonially, and beneath it, a duffel bag. Inside the bag, a child's rain jacket that didn't match any camper we'd ever had, a coil of rope, and a hunting knife wrapped in a towel. Stitched into the collar of the jacket in careful handwriting was a name that wasn't Pippa's and wasn't any name on our roster, past or present. We canceled session 3 without giving the real reason to any of the families. My parents still don't fully know how close it got. We've had a private security patrol on the property every night since, and nothing like it has happened again, not once in 6 years. But I still think about the rhythm of that knocking. 3 knocks. Even, patient, polite, like he had all the time in the world, and knew somehow that eventually somebody was going to open that door. 3 camps, 3 decades apart, 3 witnesses who never met each other, and who all described the same thing in different words. Something too tall for the space it was standing in, something that knocks instead of breaking in, something that waits until you finally open the door yourself. Whatever it is, it doesn't seem to be in a hurry, and if these stories have you checking your own locks right now, good. That's exactly the reaction whatever's out there is counting on you not to have. If this kept you up, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week I'm reading 3 more true stories sent in by people who still work at the camps where they happened, and one of them involves a counselor who found her own name carved somewhere it should never have been. Drop a comment telling me which of these 3 scared you the most. I read every single one.